Hello and welcome to Fast Fizz, a shorter episode to listen on the go. My name's Jane, and taking a look back at some of the episodes we've covered over the last year, I noticed one of the more popular ones was the one titled Drinking and Parenting. And I thought perhaps just to revisit that one today as a shorter listen, just to recap, if you are somebody that thinks, I'm drinking more than I want to be drinking, and I have young children, and I'm uneasy with that relationship, then perhaps this one might be of a little bit of use, or merely just food for thought. Because people often say, don't they, I got sober for my children. My children are my reason for quitting alcohol, for living a clean and alcohol-free life. I do it for them. They're my biggest motivation. And I just really want to put this episode out there. If there's a niggling doubt at the back of your mind that says, this doesn't feel right to be drinking the way I am while I have small children, then this one's for you. And it's not a judgment, really. I've been there. I've done it. I've drunk far too heavily when my own children were very young, and I'm not proud, and I regret that, I suppose. I do regret that I didn't remove alcohol from my life sooner, because ultimately it does rob us of things, even though we may try very hard and be very successful in convincing ourselves that it doesn't, and it's okay, and it's fine, and you've got control of everything. And that may well be the point. But if you're listening to this, the chances are you're thinking, perhaps I don't fully have this under control, and perhaps this isn't quite what I want. I think it's worth considering what drinking looks like from a child's perspective. Perhaps we don't do that often. Perhaps we're so wrapped up in our own existence and our own relationship with alcohol and our own coping devices that we don't often take a step back to think how drinking looks to a child. And if you think about it, from as young as they ever are, they see adults celebrating, holding a glass of wine in photos. It's glamorized. We're conditioning them from an incredibly young age to think this magic potion is magic. You know, have children seen you drink before? And what do they think about that? Have they ever said anything to you, perhaps, or seen you drunk? Now, that's an interesting question. Because what message does it give when children see adults behaving very differently? You know, especially if it's an adult that's usually very much in control. And now they're seeing that adult shouting, laughing manically, perhaps repeating themselves, becoming very giggly, very over-enthusiastic. That's got to feel quite concerning for a child of any age, really, to see that adult acting so very differently. And I suppose it could be fun. Finally, they're letting you have those extra chocolates. Oh, look, they're joining in a game where you have to bend into funny positions. That's hilarious. But then it becomes confusing and frightening for a child when that behaviour invariably goes a bit further, perhaps with shouting or violence or vomiting or sleeping. What do children think when they're exposed to seeing that? On a one-off or perhaps multiple times as well. I've mentioned in a previous podcast, I grew up just thinking adults are so thirsty. Like, being an adult must be incredibly thirsty work because they've always got a drink in their hand. They're always drinking. There was a lot of waiting around for people just to finish this drink, just one more drink. And, you know, as a child, I just thought that was a bit weird. And then as a parent, and I've said this in a previous episode, I'm not proud, but I taught my 8-year-old to pour wine, how to like uncork it, pour the wine. And on some level, I told myself it's life skills. I'd recently taught them how to strike a match and light a candle, supervised. I was teaching them how to peel an apple. But I knew something in my mind was thinking, it doesn't look right seeing a child pouring a bottle of wine. It doesn't feel right. And it's that feeling I'm talking about today. If you've got that feeling, maybe like, ooh, what do they call it these days? Gives you the ick. What's some phrase that is? I'm too old to use that phrase. But it's that feeling where you're like, just doesn't sit well with me. And the thing with kids, when they see us drinking, they don't know what that tastes like. And they certainly don't know how that feels as the alcohol enters the bloodstream and whizzes around and gives us that dilation, that enthusiasm, that increase in excitement and heart rate. They don't know what that's like. They just witness it. And I just think that's a fascinating perspective for us to try to remember, because, you know, children are like sponges, aren't they? And they see and they believe and they lean towards what they're told, especially from people they trust as caregivers. So how do we explain that to them? It's a difficult one, you know, and you've got to, I think, admit, as much as we might like to brush over it and gloss over it and deny it, When alcohol is involved, adults become distracted. They simply don't pay as much attention to the kids. The conversation, you become very invested in, you're very passionate about it, you're very distracted. Bedtimes perhaps slip. They go quiet, they're off with other friends, they're on a screen. But what are they actually doing? What game are they playing? And worse, who might they be chatting to while you've got a drink in your hand? Perhaps meal times slip. Well, they had a snack earlier, they can pick something out of the cupboard later. These things, I don't know, they're fine on a one-off, aren't they? But or once a week on a weekend, is that okay? But you have to think, when your time on this earth is done, and I think like this quite a lot lately, do you want to look back and think that's the parenting style you wanted to do? Is that the parenting that you chose to do? Yes, you gave yourself a break. Maybe you're comfortable with that. But I keep saying, if you're listening to this, the chances are you're not entirely comfortable with that relationship. Putting cereal out for them, setting up games and stuff, they can look after themselves. Of course they can in the morning. But, it does come down to the fact that you're just not as present. When alcohol is involved, it's like another person is in the room. I had a look at the Childline website, actually. It's sad, really, but it's helpful. It's a wonderful thing that it's set up. Their main message on there is saying, if you're concerned about a parent or a caregiver drinking, it is not your fault that they drink too much. It is not your responsibility to care for them or to talk them out of having a drink. It gives them tips like how to cope, advice on trying to talk to somebody that you trust. And it does say that you can try raising concerns, but it's never advisable to speak about someone's drinking to them while they're drunk. We know that drunk people don't take advice very well at all, certainly not about their drinking. And this does take me back. There's one clear occasion when I do recall, it was very late, we'd been drinking with friends, we came to put the kids to bed, and I think I was tripping over a bit, I was a bit giggly, and I remember my eldest looked at me, she must have been about 8, and said, "Mummy, are you drunk?" It's incredible how I remember that feeling. I stopped what I was doing. It sobered me up momentarily like that, because I thought, oh, I've been caught. Like, my child knows that I'm drunk. Oh, wow. The word drunk coming from a child's lips is very, very powerful. I've still remembered that now, that it was quite a defining moment for me. It wasn't long, actually, before I quit drinking. And, from a child's perspective, how can they raise this? How can they say, hey, parent, you're acting really weird, or I don't like how you're making me feel? Because that's the other thing the website goes on to say. It gives tips on kids helping to look after themselves, obviously call 999 if there's an emergency situation. But the key point is that you have the right to feel safe in your own home. And safe is a key word here, isn't it? And perhaps you tell yourself, well, look, my kids don't see me drinking. I drink after they go to bed. Guess what? I was in that club, right? They did see me drinking sociably at dinner or with guests, but on a weekday, I would typically drink once they were in bed. It doesn't mean there isn't a problem. That doesn't mean that it's fine, because you're going to bed impaired. You are still going to bed impaired. If they cry, you don't hear them. If you do hear them, you're slower to go to them. You hope they'll pipe down. You'll give it another 5 minutes. And if they come to you, if they're of an age where they can come to your bed, you're much harder to wake. Again, from a child's perspective, mummy, mummy, daddy, daddy, shaking your shoulder, you're completely dead to the world. That's quite frightening for a child if they need you in that moment. And if it gets serious, if there's vomiting, if they do need an ambulance to be called, you do know you're not in a position to care for them. Now, I became very defensive on this, and it was fine because my husband's had less to drink. He will look after them. My husband will hear them when they come in the room. My husband could drive if he needed to hospital. Is that fair to put that on another adult? Are you really comfortable with shifting that responsibility for those major decisions to another person so you can check out? Because as tiring as it is, it's so tiring, it's so relentless, but it's an obligation, isn't it? It's a basic duty of care that we sign up for as parents when we have them. And to check out to the point where we become pretty much unconscious, unrousable, certainly unsafe to drive or make logical decisions, it does put them at risk. And I know risk and neglect are words we don't want to hear. We want to deny them. We think, well, it's only on a Saturday night. It's only every other week or so when I'm with friends. They're fine. But the fact is, they are put at a bit of risk and they aren't entirely safe. if alcohol has impaired you to that degree where you've fallen asleep, you've passed out, you've vomited, or you're just incredibly slow to respond to their needs. And they have needs, and they have a right to expect those from us as their caregivers, don't they? And it comes back to that nobody suggests we bounce out of bed at 5 a.m. the minute the kids wake and we start doing Lego and we cook up a beautiful batch of pancakes. It's unrealistic because parenting is hard. Parenting is so tiring. But I just keep coming back to this point. They're with us, 18 years they're in our care, but you know that come early teens, they're very much more independent. They very much know how and what they want. They can meet their own needs with food and drink and things along those lines. It's a relatively short window of time that we're responsible for their well-being. And I just think, looking back, we won't want to think, as a parent, I missed opportunities there. As a parent, I was quite absent. I checked out, and I wish perhaps I'd just been more present. That's the word as well, present. Like I said, it's not getting up and making pancakes and doing backflips and all these Mary Poppins things. It's not that, but it's being present. It's being wakeable, able to be approached, to answer their questions, to answer their concerns, and to be available to children. And I do think, as a parent, it's a privilege to bring up a child, isn't it? And don't we want to do our very best for them? And if that means stepping back from alcohol, then I don't see how in any other way that can't be beneficial. There's a lot of double negatives there. But stepping back from alcohol, I think, can only be a positive in that respect while they're so young. This really does go for any age, by the way. And as I say, there is no judgment here. You may have a newborn, you may have a teen, but they need us. They do need us. You're a good parent. You're a parent who is so present during the day, but alcohol is interfering. We just need to give them our very best. It isn't an optional or a chore. Parenting is one of the biggest responsibilities any person will ever have. And I just think kids deserve a parent who's not impaired by alcohol. They crave our love and attention, don't they? And as we've said, they absorb so much like a sponge, all the conditioning that goes there. Let's be setting an example that you don't need alcohol as a crutch. Let's not be conditioning them so that they become adults who lean too heavily on a toxic substance and make perhaps poor decisions, or don't perhaps look after themselves as best they can because of alcohol, because they've seen it modelled in front of them for years. You know, I don't think alcohol has any part in shaping our children's futures or impacting the next generation if we want to take a big world view on this. If you've been thinking about cutting down or quitting, and you know that it would be of benefit to your family and particularly your children, hold on to that thought. Keep that thought going. That's a little voice that needs to be heard, because it's right. Alcohol isn't serving you. It's certainly not serving them. And this is a long-term thing. Being able to step back from that is going to lead to positive change, positive domino effects, and a healthier day-to-day lifestyle, but a healthier future for both you and your children as well. Keep listening to podcasts, keep researching the impact of alcohol, keep paying attention to those scary numbers and statistics that we don't like to see, because it's all the truth. It is all a fact that this substance harms us in multiple different ways. And if you can take steps back from that, even one day alcohol-free is a really, really positive thing. Adjusting your relationship with alcohol can be one of the best decisions you'll ever make, not just for you, but for your kids too. Thank you for listening. I'm Jane. This is Fast Fizz. Really appreciate you being here. It's great that you're listening, and I really, really wish you the very best in adjusting your relationship with alcohol. See you soon.